The sky over Seoul was the color of old bruises, a permanent twilight stained by smoke and dust from years past. Below, the city was a skeleton. Steel bones of skyscrapers reached up, their glass skin shattered and gone. Silence lived here, a heavy, breathing silence broken only by the whistle of wind through empty windows and the occasional distant groan of collapsing concrete. Lee Min-soo moved through the graveyard of his old life like a ghost. He stepped over a fallen street sign. The Hangul letters for a noodle shop he used to visit, now bent and rusted. His boots, patched and worn, crunched on broken glass. He was a tall man, his face lean and hardened, his eyes constantly scanning, assessing, remembering. He was 38, but he felt 100. He stopped at the base of a familiar office tower. This was where he had once designed bridges and community centers. Now, he calculated load-bearing stresses for ambush points, and collapse zones. His hand rested on the cold concrete. Here, he had been sitting at his desk, finalizing plans for a new library when the world ended. He remembered the screens flickering, then showing fire in the sky. Not missiles from other humans. Something else. Ships like jagged black teeth descending. Then the beams of light, not lasers, but something worse. Something that didn't just burn, but unraveled. The screaming started, and then, very quickly, it stopped. The cleansers did not come to conquer. They came to purge. They called it a sanitization of chaotic biosystems. Humans called it the slaughter. Min-soo's family had been across the city. His wife, Sujin, picking up their daughter, Ji-hae, from school. He never found their bodies. Just the hollowed-out shell of the school, the melted playground. That was 5 years ago. The grief had not softened. It had crystallized into something sharp and purposeful, a diamond of pure hate in his chest. He climbed the skeletal stairs of the tower, each flight a memory. The 5th floor was his destination. The resistance cell, called Hammerfall, had an outpost here. The room was bare, save for a few crates of salvaged equipment and a table made from an old door. Commander Park Dae-yeon was waiting. Dae-yeon was a solid rock of a man in his 50s, his hair gray, his face a map of old scars and new lines. He had been a soldier before, but the old wars seemed like child's play now. "Report," Dae-yeon said, his voice a low rumble. He didn't waste words on greetings. "The southern sectors are quiet," Min-soo replied, leaning over a hand-drawn map on the table. "No patrols in the last 48 hours. But the river basin, sensors show movement. A standard cleanser scouting unit. 5, maybe 6 of them. They're using old radiation trails as cover, thinking we're too primitive to see through it." Dae-yeon grunted, his finger stabbing the map near the curve of the Han River. "They're looking for something. Heat signatures. Life signs. They think any survivors here are just rats hiding." "They're not wrong," Min-soo said softly. "We are rats. But rats bite. And we know these sewers better than they ever will." A faint, grim smile touched Dae-yeon's lips. "What's your thought?" Min-soo's eyes were cold. He pointed to 3 locations on the map, forming a rough triangle around the cleanser's projected path. "We don't let them leave the basin. We hit them here, and here. Not a warning shot. Not a skirmish. Total annihilation. We use the old subway tunnels for approach. Jin Myung's team can plant the shaped charges on these support columns. When they're in the kill zone, we blow the columns, drop the overpass on them to disorient, then hit them from all sides with concentrated fire. Salvage what we can after. And the bodies?" Dae-yeon asked, his gaze locked on Min-soo. This was the core of it. The new rule. After the slaughter, Earth changed. Mercy was a luxury that got your family killed. Surrender was a concept for those who hadn't seen entire cities turn to ash. We use them, Min-Su stated, his voice flat. We arrange them. The pattern. He didn't need to elaborate. Every resistance fighter knew the pattern. It was a specific, gruesome arrangement of cleanser corpses, based on intelligence pulled from their own cultural databases by people like Kim Era, to the cleansers. It was the ultimate symbol of disrespect and terror. A message written in flesh and carapace. Da-Yun nodded slowly. No prisoners. No prisoners, Min-Su confirmed. They showed no mercy. We offer no surrender. It's the only language they might start to understand. Fear. The commander was silent for a long moment, looking out the broken window at the dead city. Do it. Mobilize Miao's team. I'll inform Kim Era. She needs to be ready to scramble their guns. Make sure they can't call for help. We want their command ship to know they lost contact, but not why. Not until they come looking and find our message. Min-Su left the outpost, the order settling into his bones. He moved down to the 3rd floor, where the sound of quiet activity hummed. Jin Myung was there, checking the power cells on a scavenged cleanser energy rifle. She was in her late 20s, all sharp angles and focused intensity. She looked up as he entered. We have a target, Min-Su said. Her eyes lit up, not with joy, but with purpose. Where? He laid out the plan. She listened, nodding, already thinking of the best fighters for the tunnel approach. Who was good with explosives, who could move quietly. When he mentioned the pattern, her jaw tightened, but she didn't flinch. She had lost a brother in the first hours of the slaughter. Good, she said simply. Tae-Seok is getting soft. He needs to see this. He needs to understand why we do it. Min-Su didn't argue. Survival had a cost, and part of that cost was the hardness of your own heart. He left her to prepare and found a quiet corner by a window overlooking the river. In the fading light, the water was a dull gray ribbon. He could almost see the ghost of the city that was. The lights, the traffic, the sound of life. Now, there was only the wind and the waiting. And the hate. It was a cold fire, his constant companion. It warmed him when the nights were freezing. It fueled him when the rations were thin. It was the engine that drove every plan, every ambush. He thought of Sujin's laugh. He thought of Jiai's small hand in his. They were not memories of comfort anymore. They were battle cries. They were the reason the pattern existed. The cleansers thought they had broken humanity. They had only broken its old shell. What was emerging was harder, sharper, and utterly without pity. As dusk settled fully, turning the ruins into dark, jagged shapes, Min-Su saw the first glint of movement far below, near the riverbank. The exaggerated, insect-like stride of a cleanser scout. His breath stilled. His heart did not race with fear, but beat a slow, steady drum of anticipation. The hunt was on. And in the dead city of Seoul, the rats were ready to teach the giants a very final lesson. Deep beneath the cold granite of Mount Bakan, in a place the old world had built to survive a different kind of war, Kim Era listened to the aliens talk. Her world was not of ruined concrete and open sky, but of flickering green text on black screens, of data streams and encrypted pulses that danced through the dead, satellites still orbiting above. The room was a cavernous old server farm, now humming with a different purpose. Racks of patched-together computer systems, some human, some clumsily integrated with sleek cleanser technology, threw a pale light on her focused face. She was 25, with eyes that missed nothing and fingers that danced across keyboards with quiet certainty. A single photograph, cracked and faded, was tucked at the base of her main monitor. A family picnic. She never looked at it while she worked. She didn't need to. The image was burned into her mind, a silent film that played behind her eyes every time she broke. Another piece of their code, the cleanser language on her central screen, was a series of sharp, angular glyphs. It was not designed for human minds. It was logical, rigid, and utterly without emotion. 5 years ago, it was unbreakable. Now, Aira understood its grammar. She had pulled it apart, word by painful word, signal by signal, like dissecting a strange mechanical insect. She called her decryption program Ghost. A soft chime echoed in her headset. An alert. She zoomed in on a data packet snagged from the planetary comnet, a fragile web of stolen cleanser relays and old human cables she maintained. It was a patrol dispatch. Coordinates matched the Han River Basin. It was Minsu's target. The message was terse. Unit K7 to grid Gamma Theta. Confirm residual biosignatures. Scour and report. Aira did not move to warn Minsu. That was already arranged on a separate channel. Instead, she smiled. A thin, cold thing. This was her part of the hunt. The patrol was walking into a trap, yes. But her job was to lock the door behind them. Her fingers flew. She didn't try to block the patrol's signal. That would alert the cleanser command ship in high orbit. Instead, she began to weave a lie. Using Ghost, she cloned the patrol leader's unique signal signature. She created a false data stream. As the real patrol moved into the basin, her Ghost patrol began sending back reports. On a secondary screen, she watched the real telemetry, the life signs, the weapon readings from Minsu's field sensors. On her main screen, she crafted a different story. She typed in the false narrative. Asterisk, grid Gamma Theta clear. No life signs beyond Class 2 vermin. Proceeding to secondary point. Asterisk, she sent it. The command ship would receive it, log it, and think everything was fine. But that was only step 1. The doctrine was no mercy, no surrender. It was also no wasted opportunities. She pulled up a broader tactical map. Another cleanser signal, a different patrol, was moving north of the city, towards the old airport. They were outside Minsu's operation. A problem for another day. Or perhaps not. Aira chewed her lip, thinking. The cleanser networks were hierarchical. Orders came down. Reports went up. What if an order came across? She isolated the signal of the second patrol. With careful, precise commands, she fabricated a priority order. She made it look like it came from a mid-level coordinator on the command ship. The glyphs flashed on her screen as she composed them. Asterisk, Unit P3. Divert immediately to grid Epsilon. Urgent debris field analysis. Possible human tech cache. Expedite. Asterisk grid Epsilon was a barren, rocky field 2 kilometers away. It was also where Hammerfall had seeded a large number of old-fashioned, but still very powerful, landmines and buried chemical explosives. They called it the Reaper Garden. She injected the order into the network. For a long, tense minute, nothing happened. Then, the icon for Patrol P3 slowly changed course on her map, turning away from the airport and heading directly for Grid Epsilon. Aira let out a slow breath she didn't know she was holding. They had taken the bait. Now, she was managing 2 battles. She toggled her comlink. Minsu. This is Aira. Your targets are in the pipe. Coms are mine. You are silent to their command. A second group is being redirected to the garden. Stand by for fireworks. In her earpiece, Minsu's voice was a whisper of static. Understood. We are in position. Good hunting, Aira. She didn't answer. Her focus was absolute. On one monitor, she watched the blips of the first patrol move into the center of Minsu's ambush triangle. On another, she monitored the fake signal string, ensuring it remained perfect, a calm and steady lie. On a third, she watched Patrol P3 enter the outer marker of the Reaper Garden. A message flashed from the command ship, directed at Patrol P3. Confirm diversion order. Authority code? Ira's heart jumped. This was a risk. She had stolen authority codes before, but using them was always a gamble. She typed swiftly, pulling a code from her stolen database. She sent it back. Seconds ticked by. Then the command ship responded, acknowledged, proceed. She slumped for a second in her chair. The cold air of the server room felt sharp in her lungs. A soft alarm beeped. On the screen for the garden, the first icon for Patrol P3 pulsed and then vanished. Then a second. No explosion registered on the seismic sensors. They were chemical mines designed to release a cloud of corrosive vapor that ate through cleanser armor. Silent and brutal. The remaining icons scrambled, then blinked out one by one. The garden was reaping dot at the same moment. Minsu's channel crackled to life with suppressed noise, the crump of explosives, the sizzle of energy fire, short, sharp commands. Herrera watched the telemetry of the first patrol go wild, then rapidly flatline. 1, 2, 3, 4. All 6 lights went dark. Silence returned to her coms. The only sound was the hum of the servers and the rush of blood in her ears. Her work was not done. She now had to manage the aftermath. The command ship would soon notice that Patrol P3 had gone silent after her diversion order. That was fine. Let them think it was human traps. But Unit K7, Minsu's patrol, was supposed to be quietly scouting. Their sudden, total silence would be suspicious if not explained. She began crafting the final ghost message. From the patrol leader's signature, she sent a last, broken signal. She made it shaky, filled with panic glyphs the cleansers used for system failure. Ambush, massive energy surge, systems failing, and then she cut it off. She let the signal degrade naturally, as if the transmitter was melted. Let the command ship think the patrol was hit by some lucky, overwhelming burst of old human artillery. Let them not suspect the truth, that they had been systematically lured, isolated, and butchered according to a human plan. Ira leaned back, the cold plastic of the chair pressing against her back. The screens glowed with success, but she felt no triumph. Only a deep, cold satisfaction. In the shadows of the digital world, she was a wraith. She had no rifle, but she had just killed 12 of the creatures who had turned her world to ash. She had done it without them ever seeing her face. She looked at the cracked photograph. Her mother was smiling, holding a piece of fruit. Her father was laughing. Her younger brother was making a silly face. One less patrol, she whispered to the empty humming room. The numbers were all that mattered now. Reduce their numbers. Break their will. However she could. She turned back to her screens, her fingers finding the keyboard again. The war in the shadows never slept. And Kim Ira, the ghost in the machine, had more work to do. The smell after a fight was always the same. Acrid smoke from scorched earth and melted polymer, the sharp ozone tang of discharged energy weapons, and underneath it all, the strange, sweet metallic odor of cleanser blood. Jin Myung stood at the edge of the ambush site, her own rifle held loosely but ready. The overpass Minsu had dropped lay in a shattered heap of concrete and twisted rebar. From beneath it, a single black, segmented leg stuck out, twitching in a final, useless rhythm. Clear. A voice called from the left. All 6 down. It was Choi Tae-seok, the youngest in her squad. He sounded out of breath. Move in, Myung ordered, her voice cutting through the settling dust. Salvage protocol. Priority on comm units and power cells. Be sharp. They might have friends in the area, even if Ira is blinding them. Her team of 5 moved with practiced efficiency. They were scavengers in a world of corpses, human and alien alike. They rolled the heavy, armored bodies over. The cleansers were taller than a man, their bodies protected by a natural-looking chitinous plate over a muscular, insect-like frame. Their faces were a nightmare of multifaceted eyes and sharp mandibles, now stilled. Miang felt nothing looking at them. The time for horror had passed 5 years ago. In the first frantic weeks of running and dying, she herself went to the one that seemed to be the leader, its armor marked with different glyphs. She pried a sleek, rectangular communication device from a clasp on its chest. She also pulled the power cell from the rifle-like weapon clutched in its clawed hand. The tech was cool and smooth, so different from the rough, patched-together human gear. "Got a data spike here," one of her team said, holding up a crystalline rod. "Intact." "Good. Bag it all," Miang said. The physical work was done in minutes. Then came the next part of the order, the part Tae-seok always hesitated at. Miang caught him standing over a body, just looking. "Tae-seok," she said, not unkindly. "We're not done. Help me move this one." He blinked, his young face pale under the grime. "Miang, we have the tech. Why? Why do we have to?" "The pattern," she said simply. She bent down, grabbing the dead cleanser under one arm. It was heavy, like moving a bag of wet stone. "Come on." Reluctantly, he took the other arm. They dragged the body to a flat, open area away from the rubble. The others brought the remaining 5. Miang directed them, positioning each corpse with specific care. One was laid on its back, its limbs arranged in a broken asymmetrical sprawl. Another was placed kneeling, its head tilted at an unnatural angle. A third was positioned to look like it was crawling away. They were arranged in a circle, with the leader in the center, its own weapon shoved into a joint in its armor. It was a grotesque sculpture. A message. To human eyes, it was just brutal. To the cleansers, based on the intelligence Era had pulled, this configuration was a profound taboo. It represented the ultimate chaos, a disrespect for the natural order of their hive, a visual curse. It was meant to terrify and enrage. Tae-seok wiped his mouth with the back of his hand, looking sick. "It just feels wrong. Like we're becoming monsters, too." Miang stopped and straightened up. She looked at him, really looked at him. He was barely 20. He had probably been in high school when the slaughter happened. He still had soft edges she and the others had lost long ago. She walked over to him, her movements calm. She didn't shout. She pointed a finger at the arranged bodies. "You see them as dead things. I see them as the ones who burned my brother alive in his fire truck. He was trying to help people. They cut his vehicle in half with a beam of light just for being there." Her voice was flat, factual. "You see this as wrong. I see it as a sentence. They put a sentence of death on our entire world. We are just delivering the verdict." Tae-seok shook his head. "But we're better than this, aren't we?" Miang stepped closer. "Better? Better is a word for a world that has time for fairness. Better is a word for people who can afford to lose. We cannot afford to lose. Not again." She gestured around at the ruined cityscape. "They did not come to talk, Tae-seok. They did not come to take our land or our resources. They came to erase us. Like we were a stain. No mercy, no surrender is not a slogan. It is our survival manual. Every time they find a patrol like this, arranged like this, it makes them afraid. It makes them cautious. It makes them waste time and resources. That time, that caution, is what lets Min-Soo plan the next ambush. Let's Aara steal more of their secrets. Let's Commander Park organize another cell. This," she said, pointing again at the pattern, "is a weapon. Just as important as this. She tapped the stock of her rifle. He was silent, staring at the ground, then at the macabre display. "My parents," he said quietly, almost a whisper. "They were in Bizen. There's nothing left of Bizen." "I know," Miang said, her voice softening just a fraction. "So you understand. This is not about hate. Not really. It is about teaching. We are teaching them that Earth is not a quiet place to die. It is a loud, painful, and very dangerous place to kill. And the tuition for that lesson is paid in their blood." She saw his throat work as he swallowed. Then a change came over his face. The doubt didn't vanish, but it was compressed, buried under a layer of hard resolve. The soft edge hardened. He gave a single, sharp nod. "What's next?" he asked, his voice firmer. "We mine the perimeter," Miang said, turning back to business. "Small charges. Proximity triggers. When their recovery team comes to investigate why their patrol went silent, we want them to take the first step into another lesson." She handed him a bag of small, handmade explosives. He took it without hesitation this time, his movements deliberate. He walked to the edge of the site and began carefully placing the charges in the rubble. Li Young watched him for a moment. He would be okay. He had crossed a line inside himself. A line every one of them had to cross. The world before was gone. The rules of that world were gone. All that was left was the will to continue, and the cold, hard methods to make it happen. She took one last look at the pattern. In the fading afternoon light, the twisted forms cast long, strange shadows. It was an ugly, awful thing, but it was theirs. It was a declaration, written in the only language the enemy seemed to understand. A language of fear and pain. She turned away. "Move out," she called to her team. "We're done here." They melted back into the skeletal city, leaving the message behind for the cleansers to find. A message that said, "We are here. We are not broken. And we have no mercy left for you." The victory in the river basin was a small, sharp stone thrown into a dark pond. The ripples, however, were exactly what Commander Park Dae-yun had hoped for. The cleanser response was not just a patrol or a scout ship. It was fury. It was punishment. From the high-orbit command ship, a vessel descended. It was not like the small, agile skiffs the patrols used. This was a heavy assault carrier, a brutal wedge of black metal the size of a city block. Its purpose was not to search. It was to scour, to erase the grid square from the map, to turn the ruins of southern Seoul into a sheet of glass, and with it, any human life foolish enough to be their dot in the bunker deep below the mountains. The seismic sensors screened their warning first. Then the thermal scans lit up, showing the massive heat signature of the carrier's descent engines. The mood in the command room, usually one of quiet tension, turned to ice. "They're bypassing the probes," a technician said, voice tight, "going straight for a saturation burn. They're going to glass the entire zone." Park Dae-yun stood before the main screen, his arms crossed over his chest. He did not look surprised. He looked like a man watching a dangerous animal finally step into his trap. He turned to Lee Min-soo, who was studying the same data, his face pale but calm. "They took the bait," Dae-yun said, his voice a low rumble in the quiet room. Min-soo nodded. "The patrol was the hook. Their pride is the line. And this," he pointed at the massive ship on the screen, "is the fish. A big one." The plan had always had two layers. The first was to kill the patrol and send a message. The second, riskier layer was for the moment the cleansers decided to answer that message with overwhelming force. They were a predictable enemy. They believed in hierarchy, in doctrine, in repaying insult with total annihilation. Hammerfall was counting on that. "Status of the capacitor array?" Dae-yun asked, turning to Kim Ira, who was patched in from her server room. Her face on the comm screen was lit by the same ghostly green light. Charged and ready, Aira's voice came through, crisp and clear. The fusion grid is unstable, but it's holding. I've isolated the Sol sector. The surge will be directed, but... Commander, the feedback will burn out the entire network. We will lose all power in the city grid, permanently. Dayan didn't blink. The city is dead already. Give the word when it is in position. The assault carrier settled into a low, hovering position directly over the ambush site, where the pattern still lay arranged. Its underbelly began to glow, a malevolent orange light building in power cells. It was preparing its main weapon, a plasma lance capable of melting bedrock. On the surface, nothing human stirred. The resistance fighters were gone, pulled back to deep shelters. The only movement was dust and old plastic bags dancing in the wind of the ship's engines. Min-Su, Dayan said. The honor is yours. Min-Su's hand hovered over a simple red-capped switch on the console. It wasn't connected to a missile or a gun. It was connected to the ruined, but still semi-functional municipal fusion power grid that once lit a metropolis. For years, Ara and the techs had been secretly rewiring it, siphoning off power into a vast hidden bank of capacitors and jury-rigged cleanser energy cores. They hadn't been trying to restore power. They had been building a bomb that made no fire or sound, but unleashed a storm dot that targeting data on the screen locked. The carrier was at the optimal point, directly over the central convergence node of the old grid. Now, Dayan said, Min-Su flipped the switch, deep underground. In tunnels and substations, a chain reaction began. Stored energy, a colossal amount of it, was not released. It was focused. It was channeled through 1,000 miles of stolen cleanser waveguide crystals and up through the last standing transmission towers, which had been turned into massive makeshift emitter dishes. What erupted from the ruins of Sol was not an explosion. It was a silent, invisible tsunami of pure electromagnetic force. A pulse of such magnitude and specificity that it washed over the assault carrier like a physical wave. On the command ship's sensors, it would have looked like a sudden, catastrophic solar flare localized over one city. The carrier's powerful energy shields flickered, glowing a brilliant, blinding white as they tried to compensate. For 3 seconds, they held. Then, they overloaded and failed. The orange glow of the plasma lance sputtered and died. The ship's running lights went out. It went dark and silent, a dead whale in the sky, held aloft only by its now stuttering anti-gravity drives stopped in the bunker. They held their breath. Shields are down, Aira confirmed, her voice tense with excitement. Primary and secondary power is offline. They are on emergency life support only. Weapons are dead. Sensors are blind. Dayan allowed himself a single tight smile. He looked at Min-Su. Your turn again, engineer? Min-Su's hands moved to a different console. This one was human-made, crude and boxy. It controlled the last remaining battery of surface-to-air missiles. They were old, from the previous century, bulky and slow. They had been useless against cleanser shields. But against naked hull? He selected 8 missiles. He input the final targeting data from their last visual track. Fox 1, he whispered, an old, forgotten phrase from a different kind of war. He pressed the launch key dot from hidden silos in the mountains north of the city. Plumes of smoke and fire erupted. The missiles, ungainly and roaring, climbed into the sky. They were so slow. In the bunker, they watched the blips on the screen crawl towards the motionless carrier. There was no counterfire. No point defense lasers sliced them from the sky. The carrier hung there, helpless. The first missile struck the port side engine housing. The explosion was a bright flash on the thermal scan. The second hit near the bridge. The third, the fourth. The carrier shuddered. Then, with a terrible, slow majesty, it began to tilt. The anti-gravity drives gave one last sputter and failed completely. The massive ship fell from the sky. It did not explode. It crashed with a world-ending sound of tearing metal and shattering concrete, a sound that shook the bunker even deep underground. A vast cloud of dust and debris loomed on the screens, swallowing the city's southern edge. The room was utterly silent for a long moment. Then, a cheer started, but Dayan raised a hand. It died immediately. He looked at the faces around him, at Minsu's stunned expression, at Aera's fierce grin on the screen. "Do not celebrate," he said, his voice gravelly but loud. "A cornered animal is most dangerous. We have not won a war. We have broken a tool. They will send more. They will send worse." He walked to the main screen, now showing the massive thermal bloom of the wreckage. "But today we have taught them a new fear. They thought Earth was a grave. We have shown them it is a hive. And every hive has a sting." He turned to face them all. "Now we prepare for the swarm." The dust from the crashed ship took days to settle. It covered the ruins in a fine gray powder, a new layer of ash on the old. From a high vantage point on the northern edge of the city, Lee Min-soo and Kim Aera watched the last plumes drift on the wind. There was no cheering crowd below, no flag raised over the wreckage. There was only the vast, silent testament of their work. A cleanser capital ship, broken and burning in the grave of Seoul. Aera had come up from her subterranean world for this. The cold mountain air felt strange on her skin. She held a portable data slate, its screen glowing softly. "Orbital chatter is chaotic," she said, her voice quiet beside him. "Their command net is filled with confusion glyphs. Demand glyphs for explanations. Fear glyphs. They are rerunning sensor data, trying to understand a pulse weapon they did not know we had. They are afraid to send another ship down." Min-soo nodded, his eyes fixed on the distant smoldering hulk. In the orange glow of the fires, he didn't see victory. He saw a threshold crossed. "They thought the slaughter broke our spine," he said, the wind pulling at his words. "It just removed our limits. We had nothing left to lose. Now they are starting to learn what that means." Aera followed his gaze. The photograph in her pocket felt heavy. The people in it were gone, but the cold fire they had ignited in her was not. It burned steady now, powered by the data on her slate. "Fear is a weapon," she said, "but it is a defensive one. It makes them hesitate. It does not make them leave." Commander Park Daeon's heavy footsteps approached from behind. He joined them, looking older in the dawn light, but his back was straight, his eyes clear. He carried a physical map, its corners frayed. He unfolded it on a flat piece of rubble. It was not a map of Earth. It was a star chart, marked with cleanser glyphs that Aera had translated. "Their fear buys us time," Dayan said, his thick finger stabbing a point on the chart. "A small, identified cluster near the asteroid belt. But a defense, no matter how sharp, can be surrounded and starved. We cannot just wait behind our wall of fear for them to find a way over it." Min-soo leaned over the map. He understood grids, coordinates, structures. "A forward base," he said, recognizing the symbols from salvaged cleanser navigation modules. "Supply depot, resupply point for patrols in this sector," Aera confirmed, tapping her slate. She pulled up fragmented data. "Minimal garrison. They feel safe there. It is a spoke in their wheel. If we remove it—" "The wheel grinds to a halt here," Dayan finished. He looked from Min-soo to Aera. "We do not wait for the next blow. We do not ask for peace. We take the war to them." The statement hung in the air. It was one thing to defend your home, to ambush patrols on your own broken ground. It was another to look up at the stars and say, "We are coming for you." It was a madness. It was the only logic left. Jin Myung approached, her movements silent. She had been checking the perimeter. She saw the map, saw their faces. "What's the target?" she asked, no hesitation in her voice. Dayan pointed to the asteroid base again. We hit it. We break it. We show them that the chaotic biosystem they tried to purge and reach out and burn their orderly house." "How?" Myung asked, practical as ever. "We have no ships." "We have one," Minsu said slowly, idea forming as he spoke. He looked at the wreck in the distance. "Not that. It's dead. But the patrol skiffs. We've salvaged 3 that are nearly intact. They are short range, but with work. Aera, could the base's own docking codes be taken from their network?" Ira's mind was already racing ahead through firewalls and encryption. "If I can get a deep enough tap into their command stream during the confusion, yes, it is possible. I could generate friendly approach codes. Then we don't attack from outside," Minsu said, a spark in his eyes that hadn't been there for years. It was the look of an engineer presented with an impossible problem. "We arrive as one of their own. A damaged patrol returning to the nest." Myung understood first. A grim, fierce smile touched her lips. "We get inside. Then we don't need an army. We just need the right explosives in the right places. Reactors, life support. We leave it a dead husk." Dayan listened, his arms crossed. He looked at each of them, the strategist, the ghost, the soldier. This was what Earth had become. Not a government, not an army. A perfect lethal tool forged in absolute hatred and desperate will. "It is a suicide mission," he stated matter-of-factly. "All missions are suicide missions now," Myung replied. "This one has a better payoff." Ira nodded. "The risk in the code is high, but the risk in waiting is higher." Minsu said nothing. He just looked at the star chart, then up at the sky, where the stars were fading in the growing dawn. He did not think of bridges anymore. He thought of launch trajectories. He thought of payloads. He thought of his daughter's face, not as a memory of loss, but as a beacon, pulling him outward, to strike back at the source of the darkness. Bayan saw their resolve. It was his own, reflected back at him. He slowly folded the star chart. The decision was made. It had been made the day they all chose to live after the slaughter. "No mercy," Dayan said. The words a final seal on the plan. "No surrender," Minsu, Ira, and Myung answered together. Their voices a single sound on the cold wind. They stood there for a moment longer. The 4 of them, on the edge of the dead city. Below them, the wreck of the cleanser ship smoked, a monument to humanity's refusal to die quietly. Before them, on the data slate and the worn map, was a new path. Not a path to safety or to peace. There was no such thing anymore. The path led outward into the terrifying dark from which the end had come. They would walk that path now. Not as victims. Not as survivors hiding in the rubble. They would walk it as hunters. Earth had changed. And the galaxy, huddled in its cold, silent arrogance, was about to change with it. The lesson of the slaughter was over. The lesson of humanity's wrath was just beginning.